Screen acting has changed a lot over the years, huh? What began as an art form dominated by exaggerated expressions and physicality has evolved into a craft defined by emotional authenticity, subtlety, and complexity. The journey of screen acting isn't just a history of performance, it's a mirror reflecting the cultural, technological, and artistic shifts of the time. Acting in the silent era was born out of necessity. Before sound entered the equation, actors relied on their bodies and mainly faces to communicate everything: emotions, motivation, and even dialogue, aided by the occasional title card. With no spoken words to guide them, performers had to amplify their expressions to ensure their characters' feelings were resonating with the audiences. Performers adopted a highly theatrical style, borrowing from techniques of stage acting. This was especially true because many of the early film actors came from theater, where the exaggerated gestures were necessary so that they can reach the audience members in the back row. On film, this translated to wide eyes, exaggerated frowns, dramatic gestures, and heightened physicality that could almost feel cartoonish by today's standards. Cinema was new, and audiences weren't accustomed to subtlety on screen. They needed bold cues to understand the narrative. Silent film was emerging still as its own art form, and stage traditions heavily influenced early acting style. Performers like Charlie Chaplin, whose genius laid in his ability to combine exaggerated physical comedy with deeply human emotions. His signature character, the Tramp, could slip on a banana peel at one moment and break your heart the next. Chaplin understood the importance of small, precise movements. His raised eyebrows or a subtle tilt of the head could say more than a title card ever could. Mary Pickford was known as America's sweetheart, and she perfected the art of vulnerability. She often played spunky, resourceful heroines, and her acting style balanced physical expression with a warmth and relatability that made her a star. Silent era acting was highly external, focusing more on showing than being. There was no place for subtlety because it would be missed by the audience. But as the years went on, that would take a change. Audiences became more used to seeing faces on screen and used to more subtle acting. And that's where you see the natural shift in screen acting, which was actually aided by the advent of sound in cinema. When sound came to cinema, everything changed. Acting evolved from exaggerated physicality to include the power of the voice. And this transition ushered in a new set of stars that could blend verbal dexterity with on-screen charisma. The golden age of Hollywood was a time of iconic movie stars, polished performances, and a distinct separation between actors and their roles. Performances during this era were elegant and theatrical, but more refined than the silent era. Dialogue delivery became central to the craft. Actors worked to perfect their voices, accents, and enunciation. Many performers adopted a kind of heightened realism that balanced between naturalism and the glamorized personas that Hollywood wanted to sell. With microphones capturing every word, actors could finally focus on their voices as a tool for acting. Hollywood studios cultivated brands, often typecasting actors with the specific roles that aligned with their public image. This encouraged consistency and polish rather than risk-taking. Audiences of the time wanted escapism and glamour, not gritty realism. Performances reflected this desire, offering an idealized version of life. Clark Gable became a legend of the silver screen during this time. Gable's acting style was effortless and charming, blending naturalism with the confidence of a leading man.
She's my idea of nothing.
I asked you a simple question. Do you love her?
Yes!
His work in Gone with the Wind showcased his ability to project masculinity and vulnerability in equal measure.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Bette Davis was all fire and ferocity, embracing complex and flawed characters.
We're all busy little bees, full of stings, making honey day and night.
Her intense gaze and bold choices made her performances unforgettable. She brought a physical depth to her roles, a precursor to the realism of later decades.
Take my clothes off, hold my head, tuck me in, turn out the lights.
On the other hand, Katharine Hepburn's performances were cerebral and sharp.
Time to make up your mind about people.
Often characterized by her quick wit and strong screen presence, she rejected many of the typical glamorous tropes for a woman of the era, leaning towards the unconventional and layered characters.
Is this your money?
Why don't think it is?
$20.
Yeah, I guess maybe.
That's what I thought.
Humphrey Bogart was stoic and had an understated tone to his performances, which redefined the anti-hero archetype. His clip delivery and world-weary demeanor made films like Casablanca iconic.
Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, she walks into mine.
The Golden Age moved closer to naturalism but still retained an air of artifice. Actors were performers first and stars second, and only occasionally did they hint at the emotional rawness that would later become a defining feature of screen acting. But the 1950s would mark a seismic shift in acting thanks to the rise of method acting. Based on the Stanislavski system and popularized in the US by Lee Strasberg and the Actors Studio, method acting emphasized emotional truth and physical realism. Performers didn't just play characters, they became characters. These actors dug deep into their psyches, drawing on personal experiences to perform. They prioritized internal emotions over external gestures, making their performances feel more raw and alive and unpredictable than ever before. Post-war America was grappling with existential questions, and audiences craved authenticity. Many method actors came from the theater where realism had already taken root. Performers like Brando and Dean were tired of the artificiality of earlier eras and wanted to push the boundaries of the craft. Marlon Brando's groundbreaking performance in A Streetcar Named Desire introduced audiences to a new kind of masculinity, raw, vulnerable, and unpredictable.
Oh, those cats.
He didn't just act, he inhabited his roles.
I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody.
Dean's performance in Rebel Without a Cause and East of Eden captured the angst of a generation. His acting style was intensely emotional.
You're tearing me apart!
And instinctive, blending vulnerability with a simmering edge. Montgomery Clift's quiet intensity and emotional depth made him one of the most compelling actors of his generation. He often played sensitive, conflicted characters, bringing an almost poetic quality to his performances. These three ushered in the shift from the external to the internal performance. The focus was no longer on showing emotions, but feeling them, creating an environment that was raw and vulnerable for the audiences to experience. And then the next generation took that even further than this generation here. The actors of the late 1960s and 70s matched the directors that were creating the films that we saw on screen. With directors embracing moral ambiguity and unconventional storytelling, actors followed suit, delivering performances that were raw, unpolished, and daring. Actors in the 70s often transformed themselves physically and emotionally for their roles, blurring the lines between performer and character. Improvisation became more common, and performances felt unpredictable and alive. Al Pacino's ability to balance quiet introspection with explosive intensity made him a force to be reckoned with.
Don't ask me about my business.
No.
His work in films like The Godfather and Dog Day Afternoon defined the anti-hero archetype. Robert De Niro's commitment to his roles was legendary. He famously gained and lost weight during the filming of Raging Bull and spent months driving a cab for Taxi Driver.
You talking to me?
His performances were methodical and layered and transformative. Meryl Streep had a mastery of accents, but also of emotional depth, cementing her as one of the most versatile actors of her time. She elevated every film that she was in, no matter if the material was stellar or not.
I'm not taking him with me.
The performances in the 1970s abandoned polish altogether. This was acting stripped down to its rawest form, emphasizing emotional honesty and moral complexity. And it's so much more akin to what we understand as acting today. But even still, acting has evolved, and what actors are expected to do has evolved since the 1970s. Today's actors benefit from all of the performers that came before them. They're combining emotional truth with the polish of the golden era. I would say modern acting is more defined by its range than anything else. Performers are expected to be able to star in anything from biopics to blockbusters to indie films. That's why you have actors like Daniel Day-Lewis, who's a chameleon and can perform in anything from a blockbuster biopic like Lincoln to an artistic powerhouse film like There Will Be Blood. Meryl Streep continues to be the queen of acting, being able to perform in a film like The Devil Wears Prada and The Post. Viola Davis brings an emotional intensity to her roles, commanding the screen with every performance. The same can be said for Denzel Washington. Leonardo DiCaprio can give you the charm of Titanic, but also make you hate him in a film like Django Unchained. Timothée Chalamet can go from a film like Call Me By Your Name to a film like Dune with ease. Zendaya can go back and forth between Euphoria and Spider-Man with no one batting an eye. I guess overall, screen acting has evolved from an external exercise to an internal exercise. But the best actors aren't sticking to one type of film. You're not seeing an actor stay in the indie space and not go over to the blockbuster space. Academy Award winners are looking to do Marvel films. So actors today have to be more versatile in order to stay relevant. The evolution of acting says a lot about the evolution of cinema. Who knows what actors will be expected to do next? I sure don't, but I'm excited to see it because I love actors. And I love looking back and seeing how things have changed and evolved. Who knows, maybe next decade it'll be something completely different. Guess we'll have to see.